Vet Resources Community Network. So this is what we have curated based on your feedback to really be more inclusive of all types of partners.
You understand better than anyone everything that's out there in your community.
Can you help me figure out how to navigate like this next chapter in my life?
I'm delighted to be here at the 2024 annual convening for the Veteran Resource Community Network. This is my second annual VRCN to get to be at, and it's an incredible opportunity to be surrounded by people who are profoundly passionate about taking care of our nation's veterans.
It's really great to bring community leaders from all throughout the United States together in one place to make sure that we're not only not duplicating efforts, but that we're collectively learning from each other as to how we can all better meet military-connected students, student veterans, caregivers, survivors, and their family members where they are so that we can better serve them in their transition. Honestly, that's why, I mean, to be frank, that's why this matters. That's why being here matters.
Every day, our veterans face unseen battles. Every life is worth living, and every veteran matters. Together, we can face the fight against veteran suicide.
Please rise for the national anthem performed by Trey Sorrell. Good morning, and welcome to VA's first Buddy Check Summit, hosted here at Red Cross headquarters in Washington, D.C. Is this not a beautiful room, or what? My name is Angela Spatz, and I'll be your MC for today, and we are going to have a great morning. What do you think? Okay, sounds good. We're going to make this fun, because that's what we should be doing. We're all buddies today. Besides our audience members here at Red Cross headquarters, I want to give a shout out to everyone watching from home, to our veterans, caregivers, survivors, and family members, and everyone watching at our VA medical centers across the country. So welcome, everyone. And I got to give a shout out to my friends over down in St. Louis in the logistics department. They said, hey, can we get a special shout out from you, Angela? So wherever you are, they're feeling pretty good right now, so thanks. My buddy from Guam, so there you go. When we're talking about buddy checks, what are we talking about here? We're talking about peer-to-peer interaction. We're talking about the opportunity to reach out to someone that you haven't talked to in a while. I used to live here in D.C., and I had the opportunity to reach out to my network, and one of my friends, one of my old jobs is here in the audience today, and she came to me when she was a contractor, and she's a veteran, and she said, Angela, how do I get a government job? And I said, let me show you, and she applied for a job, and now she's a bigwig over at DOL. That's my buddy over there. So she said, I pay it forward every time, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about not just VA resources here. We're talking about that 1 degree of separation to put it out there and be together. So our live audience, we will have time for Q&A, so start thinking of your questions. In the back, there is a microphone. If you can't stand up or not feel comfortable, raise your hand, and we will come over there. But please use the microphone, because everybody at home wants to hear what we have to ask, right? Exactly. I need the love back here. So without further ado, it'll go by faster, right? Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our Senior Partnerships Advisor at VEO, the Program Manager of the Vet Resources Community Network, while we're all here, Andy Martinez.
Hi, everyone. How you doing? Good, good. Well, again, just to echo, thank you to our veterans, families, caregivers, survivors, friends, families of service. You know, this is what it's all about. We know a lot of people are watching, and we want to help build momentum. We want to ask people to take the pledge, talk to 10, not just this week, which is Buddy Check Week, but all the time. If we check in on each other, we know that health outcomes go up. We know mental health goes up. We know everything just gets better. So that's just what it is. So check in, that's what it is. So also thank you to Elizabeth Dole Foundation and Face the Fight and refreshments provided by Starbucks. Thank you so much for that. And we're gonna get started, and it's my honor. I've known her a long time, she's amazing. I wanna introduce our Chief Veterans Experience Officer, who is acting, Barbara Morton, and she's gonna kick us off today. So thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. It is wonderful to be with you all today. Thanks so much for being here in person and online and joining us for the first ever Buddy Check Summit. Special thanks to our partners, the American Red Cross, veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors who have joined us today to support this very important summit and initiative. So when I think about Buddy Checks, to me, it's all about slowing down and making the time to connect. Making time to let people know that you are thinking about them, those that have served, their families, caregivers, and survivors, and even sharing resources with them that they may not know about. In this way, I am very inspired by the entire veteran community that takes the time to honor these connections this week and every week as well. Together, our common purpose and collective commitment can change the lives of veterans and those who support them, one connection and one conversation at a time. So today we have an awesome program for everybody. You'll hear from VA leaders and partners and experts on the importance of buddy checks and the connections that they nourish. We hope that you find the summit to be informative and engaging, and sincere thank you to everybody for being here again in person and online. And with that, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our first speakers, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, the Honorable Dennis McDonough, and VA Executive Director of Suicide Prevention, Dr. Matt Miller, who's also an Air Force veteran. So welcome, gentlemen.
Can everyone hear me? All right. Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, everyone, for being here, as Angela mentioned. And also, we are live right now on the Veteran News Network, broadcast, as Angela said, across the country at VA medical centers everywhere, as well as on YouTube Live. So we are very excited for today. So before we begin, today is about Buddy Check, what it is, the importance of Buddy Check, and how we can all get involved, like everyone here in this room today. But before we begin with the questions, please make sure that your phones are muted, turned off. And then, again, as Angela mentioned, please, if you have a question, and I hope that you do have a question, raise your hand or step up to the mic and ask these gentlemen up here your question. So with that, let's get into it. And sir, Mr. Secretary, I'm gonna start with you first. Let's start with why Buddy Check matters. And what do they mean? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, well, Jose, thanks so much, and to Barbara, to Andy, to the whole team, thank you very much. It's so great to see so many great veterans here. I just saw, my spirits are super high, not only because of free coffee, but I just saw Tim Hudek out front, awesome veteran teammate here at VA, who's been struggling with a lot of our fellow veterans, a lot of VA employees, a lot of our fellow citizens in Western North Carolina. And I gotta tell you, I see Tim, and he is so fired up. That's like an opportunity for me to connect with him like that. I won't speak for him, but I gotta tell you, it just really lifted my spirits. I also knew this morning that I was gonna get a chance to see somebody really important to me, and that's Bonnie Carroll. And the fact that I can check in with Bonnie, even just be in the same room with her, lifts my spirits, right? It reminds me that as difficult as some of the things I'm wrestling with right now, I've got one really big thing that's really been gnawing at me for 2 nights in a row, 2 nights of bad sleep. We all know what that means, right? Increased irritability, increased anxiousness. I'm feeling all those things. But seeing Tim and seeing Bonnie really brings me some connection and some calm and some recognition of increased resourcefulness that I have that comes from those relationships. So it's not just the goodness that comes from the relationship, the good feeling, but it's a recognition that I have increased capability as a result of them. And this is why I think the Legion was so right to point us to Buddy Check, which is just an opportunity to carve out time out of your day to check in on somebody important to you, but not just somebody important to you. Inevitably, it's going to be somebody with whom you have an enhanced social connection, which will lead to a sense of increased resourcefulness. So I'll say one last thing, Jose, because I've already talked too long, but you know, I'm the 9th of 11 kids. You know, there's plenty of times growing up I didn't want anybody's checking on me. In fact, I still haven't had my own room, right? So sometimes I am sent to another room, you know, because my wife is like, I've had enough of you. But, you know, I recognize as I've been thinking about this question of Buddy Check, but also what it means more generally, right? Which is that we're all in this thing together, that we're all in this fight, this life together. That's a big part of how I grew up, you know. And a lot of times I thought, like, all those brothers and sisters were the enemy. But here's what I'm convinced of after watching the pandemic, after watching veterans, after working with our teammates, Matt and Lisa in particular. You know, the enemy here is isolation. Right? And that's an enemy we can defeat. Right? So Buddy Check helps us defeat this principal enemy, and I'm really glad to be part of it. Sorry for the long answer.
No, the perfect answer. Dr. Miller, would you like to add your thoughts of why Buddy Check matters?
Thanks for the reminder what the question was. I forgot.
Because somebody wasn't answering it.
The importance of Buddy Check Week. You know, at the VA, we established pretty early our core foundational beliefs, tenets, when it comes to suicide prevention, those tenets that we hold to when we're experiencing doubt, uncertainty, some of the feelings that the secretary mentioned, anxiety, when things are dark. What do you cling to? What are your core truths? Our core truths regarding suicide and suicide prevention for veterans are, number one, suicide is preventable. It's not inevitable. Number two, it's going to take a community approach. This isn't something that's going to be, quote unquote, solved by a bunch of clinicians. Number three, everyone has a role to play. I think that Buddy Check Week really takes those three foundational tenets and embodies them perfectly with a call to action to all of us to take those truths, the truth that it is preventable, the truth that it does take a community, the truth that we all have a role to play, converted to now reach out to somebody. Reach out to somebody and offer support, offer resources. I can't emphasize enough the value of this. I had a friend of mine, a fellow veteran, who contacted me 2 weeks ago, sent me a text and said, "Can we talk?" He opened, once I called him back immediately, he opened with, "You and I have an agreement. We're on the Buddy Check together. I need to talk." And that is the value, I think, of what this has started and what this can do and the potential. Instead of being alone during that time, my buddy was able to reach out and have a conversation that was hopefully supportive and helpful, as it was to me, also serving within the role of his buddy in that situation.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. So those who are watching and trying to find out more about Buddy Check, and a lot of us veterans want to know the facts, what does research show for how peer support really affects veterans?
I think, I'm happy to go first, but one thing that I respect among many things about you, sir, is you do your research. And I know you've done a fair amount of research on this question, so I'll give you the table.
Please, you go first, and then I have a couple thoughts.
I think what we know is that, well, you said this in your introduction, the fact that isolation is the enemy. And that's so true. We know that intuitively to be true in our lives. We know there's a time and a place to pull aside, maybe have a few moments, gather ourselves, gather our thoughts. But generally speaking, isolation is not good for us as human beings. And I think we've seen this in new ways manifest throughout COVID in the last 4 years. We saw that the highest suicide rates that we've seen so far were in 2021. That was after the suicide rates went down in 19, they went down in 20 within the veteran population. Then in 2021, the first full year of COVID, suicide rates went up. And we saw that those suicide rates went up in subpopulations within veterans that were more isolated, more disconnected, and had their backs against the proverbial wall in more challenging ways. So intuitively, and the research does is support the intuition, social connection saves lives. When we feel connected, and when we feel that we have a purpose and a place, that is life-saving. And I think you all, I would ask you to sit back and instead of necessarily being the researcher here, ask yourself, does that ring true in my own life? Does it ring true in my own life that as I feel connected, as I feel like I have a place, as I feel like I have a purpose, that makes a meaningful difference in my life? I would venture to guess everyone in here, 100% would say, yeah, I get it. And Buddy Check Week, what it does is it communicates from one human being to another. You are connected, you have a connection, you do have a purpose, and you do have a place. And I think that that is the power. Now I'm interested to hear some of the research you've come across.
Yeah. Well, I knew I wouldn't have any more recent research than you, Matt, but I was going to make the same point you did about your own lived experience, our own lived experiences. But I'll come back to that. I think a really meaningful bit of research here, and I've been looking at this for a different reason, which is the role of chaplains in care in VA, the VA system. Instances where the chaplain was part of the care team, we've demonstrated the veteran is discharged earlier and more likely to not be to not come back into the hospital again. Right, and so you ask yourself, why is that? Now, I don't necessarily know, but I think I can intuit that what is the chaplain's role in that on the care team is connecting with the veteran on a particular sense of purpose or place, and thereby empowering that veteran with additional sense of resourcefulness and of being supported, which is like a different way to look at and I think a supportive bit of data to the data that you pointed out, Matt, which is not only does it help you avoid a worsening set of outcomes through the presence of the chaplain in the care team, you can see an empowering of the veteran, and thus kind of net quality of care, quality of outcome indicators improving. So that's the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say on this question of isolation, I was in Northwest Arkansas a year ago, September 2023, in Suicide Prevention Month, and this is when I started to really focus on this question of isolation, because there was a local leader there who made the very basic point in our conversation that as she's worked with veterans and with survivors in and around suicide, she just said she could not escape the anecdotal information in her experience about the role of isolation in that veteran's life. Last point. I think we have to be really careful about how we define engagement, right? And I think this is why the Buddy Check is such an important point. And here I want to just commend the work of VEO and of SP, as we call it, suicide prevention, on working with networked veterans and with the gaming community of veterans. There's a big percentage of veterans who are gamers. That's, by the way, male veterans and female veterans. And, you know, look, as a 55-year-old with like, I'm down to one teenager now, but with a teenager still, but also with some 20-somethings, I always worried that gaming for our boys was isolating, right? I think there's a really active community in the gaming community. And so as we think about what that buddy check looks like, I hope we're all challenging ourselves to get out of our perception of what engagement is. I kind of want to amplify the point you made a minute ago, Matt, which is this is not a clinician issue that the clinicians will clinician us out of, I think is what you said. This is a community issue. And there is community everywhere, right? Vets build community, all right? So let's make sure that we're using all of that community, energizing all that community to underscore, again, the wisdom of the Legion's thinking here on, you know, the Legion's really the catalyst here. The thinking that the Legion's catalyzed to make sure that we're checking on vets wherever they are.
Yes, sir. The glue for most of us veterans here and watching, all of us, is our families. Dr. Miller, can you talk about how it's also important to check in on families, veterans' families, caregivers, and survivors as well?
Yeah, caregivers, family members, they form the network of support for veterans. They're often the first to know in terms of what's going on with the veteran, what the veteran needs, and how the veteran is doing. I think one thing that when we talk about a public health approach to suicide and suicide prevention, I think one thing that we've learned over the last 10 years is the importance of moving suicide and care from this medical model of treating an individual to a broader model of incorporating the family and incorporating the community. But also as part of that, recognizing that creates stressors and challenges for family members, for caregivers as well, and attending to those. That's why I think partnerships with the Caregiver Support Program, for example, within the VA between Office of Suicide Prevention and the Caregiver Support Program to create a toolkit for caregivers designed around taking care of themselves, how to help take care of the family, and caregivers how to care for veterans around suicide prevention. Covering all those components, I think, is vitally important. I think also partnerships with, as you mentioned, Bonnie and TAPS are critically important. You know, I got I want to say involved, but that sounds way too clinical. This became my mission personally and professionally when I experienced the death of a dear friend and colleague when I was serving in the Air Force. He was a Marine. His wife went on and from there established mission and service with TAPS, working with family members. And I had the incredible opportunity on many occasions, Bonnie, to join you, Kim, and the team in serving caregivers and just seeing the important, vital role there. So all of that said to say that, again, and I think a key point here is that I want all of us to walk away with, this is not a one-person issue. Suicide prevention is never a one-person issue. It's a community issue, and it requires a community starting with the family and extending beyond to address.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Any questions from the audience? We have one right here. Please say your name, where you're from, sir.
How you doing? I'm Ellsworth Tony Williams. I'm the CEO for Veterans Counseling Veterans. I came here from Florida. devastation, devastation, devastation. I felt like I was compelled to come here for this event because I think it's very appropriate what's going on down there. I completely agree with the family, about involving the family. My comment, and I've met a couple of you guys, Bonnie, we met, it's been a while since I've seen you guys, but how you doing, sir? My comment is that we say community, but I don't see community. When I see your flyers, I just see your signal there. I rarely see the partners. To me, suicide is a national problem with a local solution. That local solution is the community, not national. You can't nationalize it, nationalize it. So I really appreciate the family, because I'm going to have a conference. When I leave here, I'm going to have it's going to be called, it's not called Buddy Check, more like a family check for the families, because they're the one that's hurting, so I appreciate that. A question I have for you, to make this worth my trip in the train ride here, is the intersectional studies. How many women and men who are suffering from military sexual trauma die by suicide? I just see this big blanket, but I don't see the more depth into it. So I would like to know if you know how many women and men who have suffered military sexual trauma have died by suicide. Thank you.
Military sexual trauma is I think it's a scourge on what we see, and with veterans and service members and transitioning service members, it represents a notable and meaningful risk factor for suicide. I think what you'll see in the numbers across time, and I don't want to turn this into a discussion of statistics and in turn then lose the heart and soul of each individual involved behind such statistics. But the statistics indicate that there are definitely higher rates of suicide for both male and female service members and veterans who have experienced military sexual trauma. I think what you'll see in the updated data as we take a look at our annual report, you'll see a decrease in suicide rate for women veterans who have reported and received care for military sexual trauma. On one hand, that's really good news. On the other hand, what you'll see is that suicide rates have gone up for male veterans with MST. And I think that highlights the importance of focusing on service members and veterans as a whole when it comes to issues of military sexual trauma, and doing so with a community-based approach and focus, as opposed to saying this is an issue that's specific to a certain subpopulation of veterans only. It's an issue that we all should be deeply concerned about. We all should be forming as a community to change.
I might just, so Soldier, thank you so much for coming up here for the meeting. On your first point, I just want to, I want to agree with you. One, I hope you do see on our flyers the Veteran Resources Community Network, which is obviously a really important opportunity for us. I think your basic point, your most fundamental point there, which is that VA is much more effective when we are engaged with empowering, learning from our partners wherever they are, especially in local communities. So when you see that bug on there of the Veteran Resources Community Network, that's what that's meant to do. But I take the point, which is I think we need to also look for kind of going one level down about identifying and lifting up those network partners, which brings me to the second point. The Fox grant is a relatively new, the Sergeant Gordon Parker Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program is the best manifestation of this so far from VA. And this is where we are investing in now, I think, in every state in the union and in Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, in local organizations who are working on local responses to suicide prevention. The basic recognition of the Fox grants is that local organizations know their veterans best. So if you've not yet, gotten in that, that do loop in terms of applying for that grant program, I hope you will. And one of the things that will make it worth your while having come up here, I think, is make sure we connect you into the team that oversees the grant program, so you can both get the data out of that we're gleaning, but then also make sure that you have an opportunity to apply for it in the future. I think those are the points I really want to make, because I'm super proud of VA. Right, I love that I've had the chance to work here at VA. I think it's an amazing organization. But two things can be true, which is VA can be an awesome organization, and it can be insufficient to the task. And the way we will get sufficient to the task is empowering our partners, working with our partners, learning from our partners at the local level. I was just in North Central Florida last week on Friday. I think I saw that in action. And so we want to make sure that we do more of that.
I'd also like to piggyback on what the Secretary said in regards to community. For those of you watching around the country, and for those folks in the room too, many of you already know this, but please sign up for the Veterans Resource Newsletter. And if you don't know how to get it, just Google it. Sign up on there, and we share weekly on Wednesdays a lot of information that affect veterans, that help veterans and their families, and a lot of information like Buddy Check will be there available to you to get more information on. Okay, let's talk about mental health.
I think Z's got a question too.
I'm sorry, Z.
Good morning. Quick question. We know that we're asking veterans to reach out for Buddy Check, but some of them may be hesitant because they don't know how to talk to a veteran they may encounter who's struggling with severe mental health crisis. How do we prepare them and equip them to be able to have those conversations?
Great question. I'm going to go back. My first response has me going back to my days at Michigan State University, which I think handily beats any school from Minnesota when they meet. But I'm gonna go back to those days, and one of the first two lessons I learned within developing professionally in this field. Number one was don't ask why. I'll explain. And number two was don't spend your time thinking about what you're going to say next. So don't ask why. The reason why the professors in counseling and psychology said that is because why it questions in the legitimacy, the validity of maybe what the person is saying. It's like, why? Why are you feeling that way, you know? So skip that question. And we flunked the course if in our transcripts he ever saw why. So it's pretty important. Second, and this is the one that really stuck with me, don't spend your time thinking about what you're going to say next. Just be there. So a lot of times you can be sitting in these situations talking to someone and listening, and about, well, let's just say some of you is thinking about what they're actually saying, and then a big part of you is thinking, oh my gosh, what do I say next in response to that? Because if I'm in a situation I'm so consumed with what do I say next, it's really hard to just be there and listen to what the person is saying and focus on that. So I would say as a starting point, don't worry about asking why. You don't need to necessarily go there with anyone. And don't worry about what you're going to say next or saying something wrong or doing the wrong thing. From there, I would say if you're interested in specific guidance and feedback and input, we have some great training. It's called VA SAVE training. And SAVE will walk you through some steps that I think are important to be aware of using the acronym SAVE. So S is know the signs. In terms of knowing the signs, it gives you an idea of what to be aware of and what to watch for. What serves as risk factors, what can serve as protective factors. A, ask the question. This is important because a lot of times we think, well, if I ask the question, I might plant a thought that I didn't mean to plant. It's actually not true. When you outrightly ask the question regarding suicide, what you actually do is you communicate, it's okay to talk about this. Think about how you would feel if you're talking to me and you have suicide on your mind, and I say, are you thinking about it? You know, have you, well, you know, and I'm kind of beating around the proverbial bush versus I say, hey, are you thinking about ending your life? Are you thinking about suicide? Has that thought popped up? Let's talk about it. That opens a door in a different way than working around it. The other, V, gets at making sure that you validate the person's experience. So that gets into that why question. It doesn't get, why are you feeling that way? Don't do this instead. When you take a validating approach, it's more like, I get it. I understand. And even if I don't fully understand, I'll go there with you. And I'm not going to try to necessarily talk you out of feeling that way, but let's talk about how to work through this situation together. And then E focuses on making sure people have access to important resources that they can get in touch with and connect with. Always remember in these situations, Veterans Crisis Line, you can dial the Veterans Crisis Line when you're sitting there and you're talking to someone and say, let's talk three-way, let's talk together on this call. Now it's easy to reach us, 988, press 1. So great question. Don't let the whys, don't let the what do I say next get in the way. Think about SAVE, and there is SAVE training available for free to anyone who wants to check it out. It's pretty brief too.
I might just say three things to add to this. This whole question about not thinking about your response, but rather listening. I have a friend I really admire, and in different jobs, he's urged me that when you're making a big decision, that's a time not for you to be, sometimes we think you got to shrink that decision space down. You're going to be very discreet and just talk to one person you really trust about it. He does not make any decision but for in threes, because he wants to guard against somebody not listening. Because if you're just two, the natural inclination is, as Matt says, to start thinking about what you're saying. But you know what? It's not about you, right? So you got to listen. So this is the strength of the buddy check, right? You're just checking in. 2, don't undervalue that when it's also not crisis, right? We all experience this. When I get a check-in from my best buddy on the planet, just checked in with me on Saturday morning. He said, hey, when we saw each other, I know you're thinking about X. How's it going? I got to tell you, it just opened a door for me to reach back to him, right? But the strength of the Buddy Check isn't that every vet you're going to contact is in crisis, right? But you're right to be prepared for it because that's the human condition, right? And that's a third point. We have a lot of resource through the VEO website. We have a Veteran Buddy Check resource page through va.gov/reach, right? We have all sorts of research-backed, clinically indicated reference points for you when you're talking to veterans. If because you can also say, let's prepare for crisis, even if you're not in crisis now, right? And so there are those resources available to you. And remember that the outreach in the first instance is not because you're worried about the veteran, right? It's that you care about the veteran. And this goes to Matt's point about the why, right?
Well, gentlemen, that's all the time we have, unfortunately. Oh, we have 5 minutes left. Okay, I was wrong.
Bonus round.
Bonus, let's go. Okay, well then let's talk about
We've got a hand right here.
Oh, I cannot see. Ron? Okay.
Thank you, Secretary, and
So
thank
good
you,
to see
Matt,
you.
for both being here today. Good morning, everyone. Tammy Bartlett from Student Veterans of America. With VBA benefits that can provide protective factors such as education, and those who earn both the post-9/11 GI Bill and the Montgomery GI Bill, have been in limbo since April with the Supreme Court decision on Rudisill versus McDonough. As time ticks by and more reach their delimitation date and the benefit expires, Secretary, can you provide an update on how we can inform those veterans that are eligible for both those benefits?
Tammy, it's really good to see you, and thanks for the question. Just on your first point, this is a bit of data, and Matt will be able to talk more about it, but I think last year's suicide prevention report established for the first time the fact of veterans who are receiving their VA benefits being correlated to lower rates of suicidality. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
So just to underscore Tammy's first point, which is a veteran who's getting his or her VBA benefits is less likely to suffer from or to confront suicidality. 1, 2, on Rudisill. Believe me, we feel the pressure on this because we want to make sure we have a principle guiding this debate, which is that we want every veteran to get every benefit he or she has earned. And so we think that the court has opened that spectrum very wide. We had hoped that we had been in a position to make that decision and roll out the new policy by the start of this academic year. We're not there yet because we're working through costing issues. So where we are, Tammy, is we are working through with the interagency on costing issues. We're updating Congress on that. And I'm hoping that we'll be in a position very soon to announce the new policy so that veterans can access everything that the ruling in the court. By the way, I think it's a little, I think they should not have it v. McDonough when they defeat the VA position, and they should have it be v. McDonough when VA wins. So I just think that's not fair. But no, my point is, we don't want to rush out a policy that does not allow the veteran to get everything that veteran has earned. And I think the Rudisill, importantly, the Rudisill decision does now open an entire bit of additional assistance for education benefit. And so we're trying to get there. I wish we were there already, but you have my commitment that we are working this. I talk to Josh about this every day, and we're close on this. So thank you for asking, and thanks for all that SVA does. One last thing, it's a very data-rich education programming in VBA. One thing we know, which is I think also informative to the Buddy Check, veterans who are in school who have an opportunity to have a meeting place where veterans can go after class, can go before class. Veterans can check in. You know, our veteran students in college and graduate school are generally older than their classmates. They have different experiences. The data conclusively demonstrates that when there is a meeting place dedicated just to veterans where they can come together, share experience, learn from one another, their performance exceeds veterans without that kind of opportunity. So I think that is, again, bolstering of the whole idea behind the Buddy Check, which is veterans looking out for veterans creates a special goodness, right? In some ways, I'm super jealous of that as a non-veteran myself.
Very true. One last question. Your name and where you're from.
Good morning. Mr. Secretary, my name is Norma Eli, and I am a disabled retired veteran, 31 years in the Army. As
Thank you,
see,
soldier.
I love the Army. I love our country. I love serving. I retired back in 2013 as a full-bird colonel in logistics. My husband and I took out a VA loan last year and to buy a house, our retirement home.
Yes.
And we wound up, the house that we bought needed to be renovated. And so the VA appraisal, they appraised the renovation loan into our home loan.
Yes.
Okay, which put it over $1 million.
Okay.
At 7.2%. And we closed November of last year, and to date, no construction has started on our home at all. So we're paying 7.2%, $1.2 million loan, over $8,000 a month for a house that we cannot occupy, and we've been looking at it for the last 11 months. I've been trying to contact, VA, OIG, White House, everybody, and Inspector General. I have all kinds of complaints out there. New American Funding, our mortgage company, they're getting our $8,000 a month, and they don't care that our contractor defaulted, and we can't. They gave them $122,000, and we can't get the money back from the contractor. And the contractor, like I said, haven't even applied for the building permits for Prince George's County, and it's horrible trying to get help. So I came here. I didn't know you were here, but I came
here.
Here. I came here because a Buddy Check, because I'm in a process of I care about people, our veterans and their families. So I came here for the small business association part of it because I want to become a caregiver and a life coach to help our military service members and their families. That's what my plan is for the next season of my life. Okay. But I'm sitting here and I'm looking, and I got here a little late because of traffic, and here you are.
I hear you on that.
This is the Lord's doing. Thank you, Lord, for bringing me to talk to you because I need help. We need help. Me and my husband, because my husband has been on 5 tours. He talks to a VA counselor weekly. He's in severe post-traumatic stress, mental health severely, and this is impacting him.
Yep.
And it impacts me, in my health. We need some help. And so you get these situations where you have veterans like me that I know what to do, and I'm doing everything in my power to get us help. But no one's helping us.
Yep.
Within the VA. VA oversight, there's no VA oversight on these VA loans. The VA guarantee gives the money to these mortgage companies, and then the mortgage companies treat us badly. Okay, the mortgage company's telling us, I was like, can you guys at least, disconnect that loan until our construction start on our home? And they're like, no, okay? Forbearance. Forbearance, we'll do a forbearance for you, but the forbearance will affect our credit in a negative aspect,
right?
Which is horrible. So we need some help.
Colonel, let's make sure.
I couldn't find a number for you or a link for you to contact your office or your deputy. I could not. Thank you. But I could not. Believe me, I called the VA hotline trying to get connection because, you know, that the VA White House number finally told me, like, look, we got your complaint, but if you don't hear back from somebody in a week, contact the Secretary of the VA, which I've been trying to do for the last 2 weeks.
Right. Well, you just did it.
Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus.
So you can get Zanetta's number, but I'd like to get your number on the way out, Colonel, so let's take a minute in the back. And we'll make sure that VBA reaches you. And, you know, any veteran who's wrestling with their mortgage, you know, look, this is just another thing, and this is included in the va.gov/reach, right? One of the things that veterans may be wrestling with, that, you know, many of our own family and friends are wrestling with, could be, you know, in this interest rate environment, could be managing their mortgage, right? So we have a whole bit of programming there that, by the way, when you reach out to veterans, and this is one of the things that's on their mind, if the Lord puts you in each other's path, we have resources for you to do that, but we also have a whole team that is working with veterans who have VA-backed mortgages to make sure that we're supporting you if you're in a crisis period, okay? So you've got Zanetta's number. I'll get your number on the way out, and somebody will be in touch with you the next day, okay? Appreciate you right back, Colonel. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all for your attention. Okay. For those online watching, thank you. Remember, take the pledge, take the training, find your buddies. Thank you, everybody. Secretary, Dr. Miller.
Thank you.
Be willing to show up for a veteran. Be willing to stick your nose where it doesn't belong. Hey, be willing to push and prod if things don't add up. Be willing to trust your gut, follow your heart, and take a risk.
Be willing to sit without saying a word, without checking the time, without trying to solve.
Sometimes suicide wants to rip a person from this world. Be willing to grab with both hands and hold on to a friend, a spouse,
a daughter, a son. Be the one who's willing to ask, to guess wrong,
to even offend another, to keep them safe, to remind them that they are valuable. If you know a veteran, be the one to reach out and make them a part of your life.
What a great fireside chat, right? I mean, what a great chat with the Secretary and Colonel. Nothing like getting to the top, right? There we go. Sometimes we got to do it. Exactly. So our next speaker is Waco Hoover, and I thought it was great because the Secretary teed it up nicely. He said American Legion is the catalyst. So I want to welcome Waco Hoover, catalyst, be the one, American Legion. Waco.
That's better. Can you guys hear me now? Yes. All right, wonderful. Little technical detail with the lav mic, but it's okay. So on the next slide, you know, I always like to start these off with just reminding us while we're here. You know, we know the stats, we understand the we know what the stakes are, but on the next slide, if we could just, we know this. So suicide is the second leading cause of death among veterans under age 45. That's a profound number when you think about all the other things that can take our lives. And on the next slide, we're going to see two numbers. Who can tell me what those two numbers represent? Anyone in this room? And I'll repeat them for everybody who's listening. No, okay, no takers. So the 7,000 number represents the number of men and women we've lost in combat since 2001. The number on your right is the number of veterans we've lost over that same period of time to suicide. We all know those numbers, but to remind ourselves and see them in black and white continues to fuel our mission, particularly at the Legion with Be the One, and why we work so hard with all of our partners and why we want to continue to do so, because it's about saving lives. It's about making sure that we don't lose another family member, another veteran, brother and sister. The next slide, please. So a little bit of history and legacy. You know, the American Legion is a 105-year-old organization that is steeped in legacy and tradition and is responsible for many of the most important things that support the veteran community. And suicide, if anybody isn't aware, with Be the One, is the American Legion's #1 priority. There's nothing else that's more important in the organization than dramatically reducing suicide and working across the military community to do so. So back in 2019, that's when the organization came up with the idea to launch the Buddy Check. And it's, Dr. Miller, the secretary, said it very eloquently, but social connections are one of the most powerful things that we can do to save lives. By a show of hands, how many of us in here have randomly reached out to a friend, no Buddy Check intention, text, call, email, maybe you slid into someone's DMs, and you know that it saved their lives? Myself included. That's pretty powerful. So imagine what we can do with the intention of having a Buddy Check that we're doing on a regular basis. And that's very much the spirit of why we launched this back in 2019. And it was originally designed to be twice annual, around the American Legion birthday and around Veterans Day. Next slide, please. And since that time, of course, everyone knows what happened a year later in 2020 when the pandemic hit. So the timing was just quite fortuitous that we had already built this mechanism that our membership base, our 1.6 million members, another almost million across auxiliary and Sons of the Legion, that they knew what to do. And so we were able to very quickly turn this on in a period of time when everyone needed it most. Since that time, we've touched over 1 million veterans that we've reached out to with Buddy Check. And on the next slide, I'll show you how many of our 12,000 posts have conducted Buddy Checks each year now. Almost 4,500. And the Legion has over 12,000 posts. That's almost 4 times as many Walmarts, for perspective, which is interesting. And that's something that, just to share with all of you, those are distribution centers in your community. And everyone's talked about the hurricanes in North Carolina and in Florida. They are staging points for resources, for a whole host of things that are being deployed real time to the men and women that need it in those communities. Next slide, please. So I just want to talk a little bit about Be the One, what the program is, and so everyone knows how we're leaning into this and why this is the #1 priority. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk just a little bit briefly about what our core pillars are. On the next slide, please. Actually, I take that back. We're going to talk about our objective first. So, you can read the slide, but, it comes down to be willing to act, to reach out, to be the one. A huge component of this is the stigma piece, changing culture. And I'll talk more about this, but, I'll tell you as a young Marine, raising your hand and saying I need help or admitting some degree what you would perceive as weakness, that did not fly when I served in the Marine Corps. But that doesn't mean that in doing so, it reduced our combat readiness or it made me any less of a Marine. It just means that we need to shift culture. And this is as much about shifting culture as it is about any evidence-based practice or any AI tool. Now, having said that, those things will be incredible tools so that we can make sure that we're using a scalpel versus a blunt instrument as we think about deploying these resources. But this is a huge part of what Be the One is. It is about changing culture. Next slide, please. So we've got 7 pillars that we lean into. I've just talked about destigmatization, the culture piece. And there's 2 ways we're leaning into that. One is, within our community, but the other piece is going outside of our community. You may have seen our partnerships with IndyCar. We actually have a Be the One race car. Well, why is that? You may scratch your head. Why the heck is Allegiant doing something like that? Well, it's because the vast majority of Americans have no idea that this epidemic is going on. I don't know if anybody saw recently that a veteran, a retired Marine veteran, was boarding a Delta aircraft. Not picking on Delta, just this is what happened. And they were wearing a End Veteran Suicide t-shirt, and they were asked to get off the aircraft if they didn't change their shirt. Think about that. And I don't blame the flight attendants. They probably are uneducated. They're not familiar with the situation. But if that's the kind of response that we're getting in our country, that's another signal that we have a lot of work to do to educate the broader American public. Because this isn't something that is limited to just the military community. It's going to take all Americans. It is a community. And when we get it right in our community and we start winning this fight and dramatically reducing suicide numbers, it helps all Americans. A lot of you probably know that youth suicide is at an all-time high. So again, these same tactics and these same approaches can help with a whole host of things. The next piece of this is our training program. Dr. Miller talked a little about their training. Well, we work with Columbia University and the Columbia Protocol we have a very robust and aggressive training program for suicide prevention so that men and women, all of us in this room, can identify the signs and symptoms when somebody may be in need. We think of it as CPR for the brain, and it's quite fitting that we're in the American Red Cross building here today. But if somebody falls down on the ground with cardiac arrest and no one in this room knows CPR, the chance of that person living is very, very low while we wait for first responders to get here. If we can administer chest compressions, if we can administer mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, it almost triples their survival chance. Now, why wouldn't we want to do that for our veteran community and their families when we're out there? And that's the huge part of what we're doing with the training. Be the One Lab is all about research and data. One of the Legion's superpowers is having 2.6 million members across our community. Well, we want to partner with all of your organizations on how can we expand the rigor of research, how can we utilize our posts to do that. Events, sounds pretty rudimentary, but we just heard from the Army colonel in the back, and she got here firsthand and was able to deal with something that has been a huge, huge weight on her shoulders, her families and her husbands. Events facilitate social connections save lives. Our legislative piece, we have an incredible office here, led by Mario Marquez, our executive director, and we also are doing a lot at the state level as well. And then we have a really important Be the One symposium that we host every year around our national convention, again, convening some of the most influential thought leaders thinking about counterintuitive approaches to this. Last but not least, we have our accelerator program that is steeped in partnerships, and that is all about how do we empower the smartest, most brilliant founders who want to build incredible companies to get after this and solve these problems in a way that we haven't thought about it today. How do we engage the private sector? Next slide, please. So these are our wellness factors, and we talk about a lot of these, but it's not just the obvious stuff. It's not just about mental health. It's not just about physical health. It's also about all these other things that weigh on us, that ultimately can determine whether we feel like our life is worth living. And there are countless examples of that all around us. And I'm going to run out of time here soon, so I won't dwell on a lot of these. But this is about going upstream and filtering out the number of men and women that ultimately get to the point of crisis. That's what focusing on these well-being factors is all about. Next slide, please. Really quickly on our training, this number is a little dated. Since February of this year, we've trained just shy of 10,800 of our staff and our Legion members since February, working with the Columbia University and the Columbia Protocol. Now this does 2 things. It's not just about the training piece that I talked about and that Dr. Miller talked about, which is very important, but it's also about changing culture. It's about changing stigma. Over that period of time, we've had almost 30 of our staff and members come forward and share that they have attempted suicide at least once, if not more. That was never happening before. Again, shifting that conversation, changing culture is incredibly important. Next slide, please. You can see this. We've had a 100% increase in the number of men and women that are comfortable with having these conversations and understanding the resources that are out there. Next slide, please. Again, you can see 29% increase in understanding the importance of asking specific questions and just being there. And again, another 41% in the, well, I wish I could see that over there on the angle here, but 41% increase in that other piece as well. Next slide. So I want to close with this. Be the One is all about learn, listen, and lead in its purest, most simplistic form. Learn. Learn how to identify the signals so that you can understand when you need to reach out, have a conversation. If it happens to be in a buddy check, that's amazing. If it's not, if it's in a random communication with somebody, you can identify some of those things. And they're not obvious oftentimes. Listen. Just sit there and be willing to listen to somebody. Be willing to have a conversation, hear them out. No judgment. Just be there to help them. And then last but not least, lead. Have the understanding, have the resources to be able to lead them to what they actually need. Because it's not just taking them to the hospital or the emergency room. Oftentimes it's a financial issue. It could be you're being evicted from your home. It could be something, job, it could be a relationship, you're going through a divorce. You hit a ceiling and you don't know where to go or what to do. So leading somebody to the right resource is a huge part of destigmatization around mental health. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Remember the camaraderie we had in the service? Well, VA's Buddy Check program is here to help us keep those connections strong. Whether it's a quick call, text, or coffee break, reaching out can make all the difference. Buddy Checks are about connection and support. They're a simple way to show that you care and to remind a fellow veteran that they're never alone. Visit VA's Buddy Check website to take the pledge and get involved. But most importantly, help us make a difference by reaching out to a fellow veteran today.
Welcome back. So our next panel is our Fireside Chat, and it's our Buddy Check Partner Fireside Chat. And what Tony was saying, exactly, it's in the community, and this is where our partners come in. This is where the Vet Resource Network comes in. So I'm glad to see you here, Tony, today. Finally get to meet you in person. And we say this all the time. We cannot do it alone. And I just have to give one shout out here to my buddy, Mark. I work from home, and I have a lovely husband who's a stay-at-home dad. He takes care of Spat's business, as we say. And he's retired Air Force 25 years, and he really does not have a tribe. He's probably going to kill me. He's at home watching right now as I'm saying this. And Mark, one time I said, oh, thanks for switching the time to meet with me because I'm picking up my daughter from school. My husband has a golf date with the neighbor down the street. And his wife is actually a reservist, and you know he's a semi-stay-at-home dad too. And he said, hey, can I send your husband some golf swag? And I said, absolutely. So about a week later, my husband gets this package from Vets for Warriors. And he said, hey, I got this from this general, you know? And I said, yeah, that's Mark. I told him that you had a golf date down the street with Rama. And then a couple days later, my husband says, well, let's invite Rama and Missy over for you know, Sunday afternoon snacks so I could give them the golf swag. And I just thought from that one little conversation, here we go. This is what I'm all talking about. I'm all about that 1 degree of separation. So, Mark, I just want you to know you made a difference in the Spatz household. So, and any excuse for some more golf, according to my husband. So he thanks you very much. So I know I got to get moving here. So our next moderator up is Army Major Retired DJ Skelton. DJ.
It wasn't that long ago that we were talking about educating and reaching out to the veterans themselves that were struggling, and it was the onus of responsibility was on the veteran to find the strength amongst the stress that they were living to go find help and then give them the resources to do that. And I'd be a hypocrite, I am a hypocrite, to tell any fellow veteran to do that, because I struggle even to this day through stigma to pick up a phone and call anyone to say, hey, I need help with whatever aspect I need help with. And it's cost many of us some very important relationships in our life. This Buddy Check is a shift in the way we think about relationships in the veteran community. And the shift is to alleviate some of that responsibility and weight on our veterans and to shift it to those that are close to us, those that we trust in our lives first, before you introduce us to the organizations and the agencies with people that we're not so familiar with. We hear the VA at the national level is rolling out another national program. And although that's extremely important to have the weight and the support at the national level, there's been great organizations that have figured out the powerfulness of peer support within the veteran community and have been practicing peer support and building very powerful networks over several decades. And we couldn't think of three better leaders than we have sitting in front of us today that have been embodying and believe and have been practicing the power of peer support for a long time on the ground. And so could you just quick introduce yourself? We have Bonnie, we have Mark, and we have Blaine. A little bit about who you are, then quick about the organizations you represent.
Sure, DJ, thank you so much. I'm Bonnie Carroll, and 32 years ago, my life changed when my husband and 7 other soldiers were killed in an Army plane crash. I was a Air Force Reserve officer. I had been trained in critical incident stress debriefing. I thought I was well equipped to handle that type of tragedy, but wow, that little fantasy lasted about 30 seconds, and I could not even breathe. It wasn't until months later I reconnected with the other families who had lost their loved ones in that crash that we found that magic, that just that connection, how important that was to have authenticity, just to speak without judgment, to share what we were truly feeling, to connect soul to soul as only peers can. I've been to multiple therapists, and I just left asking them, but what do you really know about what has happened in my life? They could not relate as a peer could. So it was out of that connection, out of those relationships, that freedom to speak and normalize and validate what we had gone through, that we created an organization, because back in the early 90s, it didn't exist in America. So TAPS was launched 30 years ago this month on a peer-based emotional support model to be there for all those grieving the death of a military or veteran loved one, because grief is not a mental illness. It isn't a physical injury. I wish it were that simple. I wish we could take a pill or put a splint on it or wear a bandage and it would have this nice, neat trajectory, but it just doesn't work like that. And when it's a death in the military community, there are secondary factors. You are losing a community. You know, I was talking yesterday with one of the families who lost their loved one in that Growler crash out in Washington State. And the conversation shifted when they found out that my loved one had also died in the mountains in a training aviation loss. And suddenly we were connected, and I have no doubt we will be friends for life and connected in that way. But that's the value of this peer support. That's the value of our veteran community, that we come together to normalize and validate the experiences that we have had, and we are stronger because of it, because we create that safe space for each other. So for the past 30 years now, hundreds of thousands of survivors have found that community within TAPS to honor their loved one and grieve their loss.
Well, thanks, Bonnie. And first off, I'm here because you can see I'm a Gold Star father, and I met Bonnie in 2005, and because of TAPS, it's made a difference in my life and my family's life after losing both my boys. One to suicide and one in combat in Iraq. I came to Vet for Warriors 11 years ago. My plan was to retire from the Army and work 5 years and golf and do other things, and here I am 11 years later, and I just can't stop. Over 900,000 contacts at Vets for Warriors in almost 13 years. Over 900,000, so we're going to hit a million individuals reaching out. Vets for Warriors is a 24-hour peer support network. We hire Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, male and female veterans, and veterans from every era. And anyone can call us anytime, day or night, 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. And in 30 seconds, they'll answer the phone live. Because their goal is there to listen to you and to hear you. I can tell you that it's confidential. It can be anonymous, because when you tell us your name, we don't know if that's really your name or not. And that's not the important part. The important part is we're here to listen and help and just talk and whatever you want. Our goal is upstream. We want to help you before you get to the point of crisis. We work with the Veteran Crisis Line and do warm transfers back and forth. But our goal is to help you early on, before you get to that point. Buddy Check is really important. We do that every day. So I would ask you and all those watching out there, put Vets for Warriors in your contacts of your phone. Just put us in there. Put the number in there, 855-838-8255. And when you talk to someone, whether it's in your community, virtually, we're a virtual network. We're everywhere. So you can reach us through our website, through a phone, soon to be text, on a mobile app coming out soon, because we want to meet you where you are. But it's hard to reach out, as DJ said. And sometimes you want to talk to somebody you don't know and you're never going to meet. That's who we are. We're the person who served, but you're probably never going to meet our peers, and you don't know them. But we thank you that you trust them and have confidence in them, that they're going to talk to you and listen to you. And we'll also call you back. We'll connect you to resources if you need those. We collaborate with so many organizations, certainly TAPS and others, many in this room and watching, because it takes everyone to do it. So our peers connect you to resources, and we follow up just to see how you're doing. Sometimes you call and just want to talk, and we follow up because you say, can you give me a call? Yeah, or we'll ask you, hey, can we give you a call back just to see how you're doing? Wow, that would be great. We talk to some veterans we've been talking to for years. We talk to them once a month. They just want to look forward to that call from another veteran. I could tell you story after story of individuals who called, many of them in the middle of the night, who were lonely. We talked today about loneliness, but the other challenge we have is isolation. We think of loneliness in rural areas, but there's also isolation in urban areas, where many of our veterans are living in urban areas and they feel all alone there, which is, of course, a red flag. Vets for Warriors has clinicians, licensed clinicians, but they don't answer the phones. They do our trainings, and they also review cases, and they help the peers to work their way through this. If somebody's calling and they're struggling with substance use or something else or anything else going on in their life, they help them work through those. So I'd ask you, share the number. Do the Buddy Check. That's great, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, a veteran will answer the phone live in 30 seconds. Just call Vets for Warriors. Thanks.
DJ, thanks. It's really an honor for me to be here at all. I appreciate being invited and being able to share the podium here with these two wonderful people who are doing great work. My name is Blaine Smith. I was an Army Special Forces officer from 2001 to 2010. Along the theme of loss, I'll just share, I lost 5 of my teammates in my last deployment to Afghanistan. Exited the military, tried to work in corporate America for a little while, which was only okay, and decided I needed to do something else. And my friend Mike Irwin asked me to be the first executive director at Team RWB, where I spent 5 years with my sleeves rolled up, meeting people like Tony down in Tampa, Florida, and Tim Hudak and others, just sharing a workout, breaking a sweat, doing community service alongside veterans, and watching the power of one connection build to 2, build to 4, and the compounding effect that it can have, one kind of handshake, one high five, one hug at a time, and seeing the difference it makes in the lives of veterans and their families. And for the last 6 years, I've had the privilege of representing President and Mrs. Bush at the George W. Bush Institute, and really have shifted my focus onto the mental and brain health side of the house. And I'm lucky enough now to lead an organization called the Veteran Wellness Alliance that has a tool called Check-In that allows any veteran, any family member, any buddy, any military member around the country to just go to veterancheckin.org, fill out a brief contact form, and proactively we'll have a human being, a really well-trained and compassionate human being reach out to you, get a little bit of an understanding of what you're going through, and then make a warm handoff, get you connected to the most appropriate resource that you or your loved one may need for mental or brain health based on where you're at, what you want, what you're eligible for, and what you're going through. And this has been pivotal, I think, in this discussion because so many people, Z, you mentioned this earlier, we want to reach out. We want to reach out to our 10 or our 20 buddies, but some of us have some trepidation about that because we're not quite sure what to do if somebody shows up at our door or is on the other end of the line and they're really in a bad spot or need some help. And as friends and as peers, we don't want to do nothing, right? But we don't want to do the wrong thing. We don't want to make things worse. And we saw throughout several of the organizations I've been involved in that people are less likely to volunteer. They're less likely to help out. They're less likely to be engaged if they're fearful that something's going to happen on the other end of that engagement and they're not going to know what to do. And so we created veterancheckin.org just to kind of be the easy button, if you will. You guys all remember that commercial, right? That was the dream, is what if we could just create an easy button? And someone needs some mental or brain health, but I don't know where to send them and I'm not sure what to do and it's not my job to diagnose them. What do I do? You just go there, you hit the submit button, and a really wonderful, well-trained person will reach out to you and take the baton and make that happen for you. So I'm a big believer in the power of community. I'm a huge believer in the power of peer support. I've seen the great work that these two organizations do, and I know that it works. And so I'm thrilled to be here today to encourage everybody to reach out to 10 or 15 or 20 or 1, by the way, or 1, and see if you can catalyze that conversation and move somebody in the right direction.
As the incredible team at VA continues to roll out this initiative called Buddy Check, we heard from the Secretary this morning how in order for this initiative to be successful and to have the outcome that we all frankly need it to be, the VA needs to rely on its partnerships and more importantly, learn from the organizations on the ground and the local communities that are being successful in this. What are some of the trends that you've seen in your organizations that have provided successful outcomes? Like what's that special sauce, the ingredients that you've been doing? And reversely, what are some things that are some sticking points in growing and developing peer-to-peer networks as we hope to see the success from the Veterans Buddy Check Summit?
Great. Thanks, TJ. You know, we recognized about now 20 years ago an increasing trend in the number of deaths due to illnesses. And we started talking to the families and understanding that these were environmental, not genetic, that the families, their loved ones were exposed to toxins. And that led to the creation of the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network because so many of our surviving family members had been caregivers prior to the loss. You know, the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network, now run by Melissa Como, resides right here in the Red Cross. And that has been a tremendous program, and it is peer-based support for those who are caregivers to a loved one. And then we have a warm transition to TAPS should a death occur. But what we've seen over the past 30 years is an increase in suicide loss. What we're able to do, and it's with my partner Jim Lorraine, at talking to surviving families to understand the risk factors they saw in their loved one prior to their death. It helps us inform prevention efforts. We've been doing this now for decades. I had the opportunity to co-chair the DoD task force on the prevention of suicide by members of the armed forces back in 2010, and we use those insights to write that report. And it is those 5 risk factors that today hold true as the leading causes or contributing factors to suicide. I'm so grateful Babs Chase is here and all the work that you're doing with Face the Fight and the whole team that we have now and how our nation is engaged in preventing suicide. But it does take a community and it does take peers to reach forward, to check in, to be present, to acknowledge that this is tough work, but we are stronger together.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. And we too, first, thanks to the VA and to the Red Cross for hosting this and Face the Fight, of course. At Vets for Warriors, I think the secret sauce is the peers. They've all served. They've all transitioned from the military. They all come with their own stories. And so they get it. You know, sometimes we say we are who we serve, and we are. We're here to help and not judge. We tell them when we used to be in the call center full time. Now we've got a lot of remote work going on. Check your stigma at the door. Somebody calls and says, I wanted a green pencil, I got a red pencil, then your answer is, okay, well, how can I help? So it doesn't matter. So the secret sauce is people and training. So we hire veterans, and many don't realize that. Many think all of our peers that answer the call lines or volunteers, they're paid employees. So we hire and train veterans to help other veterans and their families. It's a win-win. Our goal is, people say, so what happens if so many people just start calling you? I said, well, then I get to go up and ask for more funding somewhere. But that's a good problem to have. That means more people are calling. So just to get individuals to call, and one thing I ask you, put our number in your contacts, put our phone number in there. So if you're ever with a friend or someone you know, and those watching, and you're ever with someone and they're struggling and you're not sure what to say, you don't have to be the expert. Just say, let me call Vets for Warriors, and let me talk to one of these veterans, and you just push the number and speed dial and go right to us, and let's talk, and talk about what's going on in your life. Because the goal is to keep on going, one day at a time, one individual call at a time. We average 24 new individuals a day reaching out to us who have never called us in 13 years. I never do math in public, but that's a lot. That's a lot. The other day I was somewhere speaking and I said that, and then I stopped and said, oh my gosh, that's 1 an hour. So there's one new individual calling us every hour who's never reached out before to talk to somebody. And again, a lot of times that's someone they're never going to know and not going to see. So we want to get past that. Our goal is to connect you. Many times it's for mental health care. It could be for other things. But I will tell you, 50% of those who call us, they just call us to talk to someone. And that's fine. So whatever you need. So Vets for Warriors, please spread the word. Our goal, we work with every organization in this room. We're very collaborative. It takes us all. I had a guy tell me one time, I'll never forget. He goes, we could all work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there's still not enough of us out there working to help America's veterans and their families, and these wonderful caregivers and all the survivors. Thanks.
Yeah, DJ, I think we're hitting all around what really is the macro trend, which is that it comes down to peers and personal connection. And I think just to speak to it more broadly, I think that this amazing proliferation of technology that we've had over the last 10 or 20 years is much maligned for good reason in a lot of ways. It's also done a lot of good in terms of people being able to be aware and be in touch with those who they may have lost touch with or they want to have a connection with, and just kind of have a finger on the pulse of what's going on. I think the mistake we often make, however, is that we think we can solve some of these very human issues technologically. So, we try to come up with a solution that scales. I remember back in the early days at Team RWB, someone would say, like, how are you going to scale what you're doing here in these one-on-one workouts, these kind of connections? And I used to say, like, I'm not sure yet, but I'm confident that these things will not just aggregate, but they will compound. And we've got to do it one at a time. And I think we were proven to be right and for that to be true. And so I would just kind of challenge everybody to think about how you can leverage these technological tools, whether it's social media or otherwise, yes, to reach people, yes, to inform people, and maybe to kind of keep up with people a little bit, but then convert that into the analog or into the real world and make a real human connection with them where you can. I'll give you a simple example. If you see a Facebook alert that it's so-and-so's birthday, don't be the 400th person to say happy birthday, or on LinkedIn, congrats on your new job. I mean, I see that so often, I just think that person doesn't give one crap about me because they didn't even think to personalize the message. Instead, see that and say, oh man, my friend, my old teammate got a new job. And then text that person and say, how you been? I saw you got a new job. How are things going? That subtle difference, I think, ultimately makes all the difference in the work we're trying to do. So let's use all the tools that are available at our disposal, but let's not forget, we've got to convert that kind of connection, if you will, into something that's very real. And so I think that's what we're all really trying to do, and we're going to have to do to get to some of these more serious issues.
Well, it doesn't happen very often to have these three individuals co-located up on the stage in front of you all, so please, let's redirect. And what are your thoughts? What are your questions you have for these amazing leaders? Let's go back here. Yep. And then Greg next.
Hi, good morning. Jennifer Hunt, I work at BHA. You hit on it in your opening remarks in that it can be very hard for veterans to reach out. So I was wondering if you could speak a bit about the precipitating factors that cause people to reach out other than, you know, being told to by a friend or a spouse, and how we can, to borrow a term, scale that self-seeking behavior within our community.
Well, I'll take a stab at it here. So I think what causes people to reach out is sometimes they don't know where else to turn. And sometimes it's just, you don't know where to turn, but then somebody gives you a number to call, or a friend will tell you about a number. A lot of times we ask callers, how'd you find out about us? And so oftentimes it's a friend, a buddy, another veteran told us to call this number. Early on when we started, we never had that. Other callers, individuals who call us, never told someone else about us because of the stigma. They would never say, well, I called this organization because I was really struggling, because it's tough to do that. Now we see more and more that happening, to where they tell each other, they tell others. And I think the other thing is collaboration, is other organizations. I'll say this, and I probably shouldn't, but I'll say it anyway. If money wasn't involved, collaboration would be amazing, even better than it is now, because everybody collaborates, but then everybody's got to, everybody's trying to go 1 year at a time, right? It's a challenge. So I think the collaboration is huge. And it's interesting to see all these organizations, they're all on our website, we're on their website. 10 years ago, I don't think you saw a lot of that. I think collaboration's really gotten better. And so I think knowing that there's not just one answer, there's multiple options, but just reach out to somebody. And if it's not us, we'll connect you to somebody else. You'll reach out to another number, they'll connect you to somebody, but we'll all make sure you're connected. And the key is, don't let them go. Hang on to them and don't make them feel like they're just being passed around, because they're not. We do warm transfers and warm handoffs. That's the key. So I think personalize it as much as you can, and let them know that there are a lot of ways to get up. Last thing I'll say is, we have not a lot, but many individuals that call us that say, please don't just give me a list of numbers or another website to go to. Because they're at the place where they just can't do that. They're like, please don't do that. So we try not to do that. Okay, let's not do that. And then we will help them do that, or call for them, or whatever we can do. So just reach out.
And Jennifer, you and I have talked about this, that with surviving families, it is tough to make that call, because you don't want this to be your life. So what we always say in training with casualty officers or in other military folks is, please ask them, would it be okay if I shared your number with these folks who have help available? And then if we reach out in just in a way that you do with your monthly check-ins, it's so much easier to take that call. And we've had folks who have said, they saw it was us calling, they put it down, but finally answered, and they said it was the best call of their life. But sometimes it's a little easier if friends around you can be proactive with good resources.
Yeah, I think a great question, because I think understanding what motivates people, especially in these moments, is really critical. And I think what we've seen is that when people are in a tough spot, really one of two things is going to motivate them to actually take action. Because most people, especially if they're struggling with their mental or brain health, will have some level of avoidance, and they might just do nothing for a while. But something will make people move, and we think of this as either you're running to something or running from something. And sometimes the discomfort builds so much, or your spouse says, that's it, you've got to do something, or you lose a job, or the discomfort builds to a point where you say, I've got to do something, I've got to get some help. And we see that a lot, and that's not what we'd prefer to see, but sometimes that is the motivating factor when someone says, this is it, I can't live like this anymore, I've got to get some help. And if that's the case, that's totally okay. What we prefer to see, and what we're starting to see a little more of, is people that are running towards something. Meaning, when they're joining a community organization that invests in community service or physical fitness, they're like, I don't have to say there's anything wrong with me or wait until something becomes wrong with me. I can just kind of proactively engage in something that I can aspire to. And we're seeing that even now around mental and brain health. People are saying, like, go get a tune-up, go get a checkup, go optimize your performance. And I don't really care how people describe it, but I love this idea that you can seek out some of these services because you want to be your absolute best for your job or for your family or for yourself, rather than waiting for something to build and you say, like, that's the end of my rope, I've got to go do something. Either way is okay, But I think understanding the motivations is important, and we can't just wait for people to kind of be running from something. We got to start dangling some things out there and showing people there's a positive thing to aspire to and say, hey, run toward this. Still use the same services, but do it in kind of a proactive way.
Question up here, Greg. And this will be, unfortunately, we're out of time. This will be our last question. But please, if you all have questions, please find any one of these leaders online and reach out, or myself, or the leadership here in the VE office from VA. Greg?
Good morning. Thanks for being here. Greg Boney, Stafford, Virginia. Question with regard to the services. A few years ago, I had an issue with my aunt. She's not a veteran. Are these services available to somebody outside of that? Because they sound like a great service. I went on Google. They gave me a 1-800 number. I called suicide hotline, and it was pretty much worthless. She finally got some help. But is this strictly for veterans, or could I have called something like this for my aunt to get some help?
Yes, you can call. First off, I lived in Stafford twice, in Aquia Harbor, so. And that's why I
bought your house.
That's why I live 11 miles away from work now, because I didn't want to commute anymore. Anyone can call us, and once you call, then we'll help. Whatever you call, because that's a third party call. So you call, and we just log it in as a third party caller. You're calling about someone else who is a veteran or service member or family member. So absolutely, you can call Vets for Warriors anytime.
And in the case of TAPS, our mission statement actually is to care for all those grieving the loss of a loved one in the military and veteran community. So it is very, very broad, but we really encourage, and it's a tough thing to educate our community about, that we are available. So it is casework assistance, peer-based emotional support, community-based care, and our 24/7 helpline, totally available, all free of charge.
Same, I'll just triple down on that. If you're military connected in any way, err on the side of caution, get connected. And if you're a spouse, caregiver, survivor, family member, and I know through our services, we allow you to define family however you like. So it could even be a roommate, partner, et cetera. We're gonna point you in the right direction, even if our specific services aren't exactly what that person's looking for.
All right, so that was a little bit shorter than I expected. Let's do one more final question right here, sir.
Thanks. Hey, Blake Bourne, Veterans Bridge Home. Great to see all of you. Let me first say the first organization I joined out of the Army was Team Red, White, and Blue, so grateful for what you do. Sir, I've called the Vets for Warriors line several times alongside fellow veterans in crisis. And ma'am, I've said several teammates that your organization has cared for, your fellow Gold Star family. So thank you all for what you do. Sir, to your point about collaboration, along the lines of my friend from Florida, when we have these local communities, like in Charlotte or across North and South Carolina, Georgia, we have a Mission 85 network with Upstate Warrior Solution and the Warrior Alliance in Atlanta, trying to work through our VA partners. How would you suggest the best way to work with your organizations for communities that don't have maybe the relationships that we do or that Jim Lorraine does of having worked together for the last several years? What would be the best ways to plug into your three organizations at the local level?
Great, thanks for that. And we work with Jim and AWP too, by the way, as well. So thanks for saying that. So we have we had to figure out a way to get the word out and be connected in communities. So I had a blinding flash of the obvious one day and said, why don't we start some kind of program called Ambassador Program? So this is one of those things in the military, you always plan for worst case, and you rarely plan for overwhelming success, and that's what happened. We had overwhelming success, and we were not ready for it. So we had all these people saying, hey, I want to be an ambassador, and was Ryan in here? Ryan. So Ryan Padilla, Army veteran, great American, joined the Vets for Warriors 2-3 years ago, and he's our ambassador coordinator. So several of you in the room I know were ambassadors, and we thank you for that. So that's a great way to do it, is become an ambassador and connect, and we can connect with you. We're getting better and better. We have an ambassador portal on our website. We're getting better at communications. Ryan's making all that happen. So talk to me, talk to Ryan, but connect to our ambassador network, and then we can make sure we're connected to your organization as well, or just email me at director@vetsforwarriors.com.
Yeah, at TAPS, surviving families are in every community in this country. So we connect folks through our peer mentor network. We've got tens of thousands of trained peer mentors, but also through something called TAPS Togethers, which are community one-day events around an activity, or care groups that are happening all across the country. So it's getting folks engaged where they live. but we are constantly trying to set that, get that activity going. That's a great question.
Yeah, and same. Likewise, you can get a hold of me or any of us at the Veteran Wellness Alliance or at the Bush Institute. All the things that we're offering right now are totally free, no cost to the veterans or the family members. And we built the resource for people to use it. So that's my only hope, is that people will take it and use it.
There's moments in my life since I was severely wounded 20 years ago, the moments where I felt quiet, and call it ghosting, I guess, these days, or isolation. I was very lucky to get unexpected phone calls. And some of the people that would call me to just say, hey, how are you doing? Haven't heard from you in a while. That phone call made all the difference. And I just want to say thank you. There's many people here. Many of the leaders that are in this space take their leadership hat off. And they're actually themselves doing and practicing peer-to-peer support. And Jim, back when we worked together, and Bonnie and Linda, I think, popped out, George, and it's made all the difference, which has allowed me to stand here with you today. So thank you all, but thank this panel for taking time out and helping us learn, helping the VA make this program the best program that we need it to be to reduce the stress that's overcoming so many of our veterans. So thank you.
In the military, we meet our mission, and we take care of those who serve to our right and to our left. We rely on each other, and we share experiences that stay with us for a lifetime. I'm Bonnie Carroll, an Army surviving spouse and a retired Air Force Reserve officer. I'm also the president of the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, or TAPS, America's organization for all those grieving the death of a military or veteran loved one. I'd like to remind you that October 16th kicks off National Buddy Check Week. Take the pledge. Use this time to reconnect with 10 battle buddies and old friends from your service. Check in. Make sure they're okay. Let them know you care. Your contact can help decrease isolation and increase access to VA mental health care, earned benefits, and, when needed, crisis intervention and support. I encourage you to take the pledge to talk to 10 of your battle buddies, and if you are grieving the loss of someone who died while serving, or from an illness or by suicide, TAPS is here for you with 24/7 support and connections to resources. Call us at 800-959-TAPS or visit taps.org to access all of our care. We're here for you. We honor your service and your sacrifices, and together we can heal.
That was a great video, so kudos to Bonnie on that. That was last year, so I guess we got to redub the the dates on there. So when I watched that video, I just thought, we talk about veteran buddy checks all the time, but I just think it's so important, as we're all here today. It's all inclusive. It's family members, it's caregivers, it's survivors, it's everyone. So we see veteran buddy checks, but we're all in that. Just like they said, we don't discriminate. We're all working together for one. As a military spouse myself, it was always so important to me to always be a part of it. I never really saw a difference between that with that community, because we're all part of it in one team, one fight. So in real fashion, because I am from Chicago, I've had the pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Jordan, and I felt like we needed the lights, hailing from Duluth, Minnesota. Dr. Michael Jordan, and I'll be serious here, Vice President Service to Armed Forces International Services, American Red Cross. Michael. Mike.
How'd you like a name like Michael Jordan and look like me? Actually had a chance to meet him when we were in our 20s, and he liked Marines, so we got a photo with him, and so I've got my photo with Michael Jordan, and he's also been a donor with the Red Cross. But I was asked to speak today briefly about the experience of being a Gold Star father, suicide survivor, and also a Marine combat veteran, and why I joined the Red Cross. And I'll do that in 9.5 minutes.
There you go.
So, as a Gold Star father and combat veteran in both Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Desert Storm, I was inspired to join the military because of my father, who we just laid to rest here this past spring. 93 years old. He was a Korean War veteran, and he had inspired me to enlist a month after my 18th birthday. And we laid him to rest near my son, Travis M. Jordan, who was a lieutenant who died 5 May 2016. And according to my faith, I believe that today they're together making music. They're both avid musicians in heaven and guarding the pearly gates, as they say. But I have a special memory of the two of them. When my dad, who was a sergeant in the Korean War, he pulled out his dress blues when he was in his 80s and he's still fit. And he came to my late son's commissioning, and he rendered him his enlisted man's salute to Second Lieutenant Travis Jordan. A very proud moment and a memory that sticks in my mind. So I'm going to pause there for just a moment. So I'm going to shift gears and talk about why the Red Cross, service to the armed forces. And the reason I joined this organization in service to the armed forces is because how my Marines and I were treated downrange, and all the effort they make to keep connected with the troops from a humanitarian perspective around the globe. And I learned this, and I'll share it with you in 3 brief stories of how I learned about what the Red Cross does downrange, keeping connected with troops around the globe. The first, and I'm kind of dating myself, but just over 40 years ago, you recall the Beirut bombing of 1983. Just to be clear, I was not in the blast. I was a replacement. I was a brand new second lieutenant at this point, completely overwhelmed with taking over a platoon that just got blown up in the blast. And I took over for Lieutenant Bocci, who was a captain select and the communications officer and platoon commander of a 109-man platoon. And it was my job to restore the platoon. And I got a flood of Gold Star parents coming in to talk to me about that I know their sons, and it was all-male platoon. And I also needed to visit the Marines that survived the blast and were at the Camp Lejeune Medical Center recovering from their wounds. And we learned then it wasn't just physical, but it was emotional, and that's what we called it then 40 plus years ago. We didn't have the term, to my knowledge, of PTSD. We knew that they had emotional trauma. And so the Red Cross, Service to the Armed Forces, took me under their wing and helped me navigate that as a brand new second lieutenant, both with the emotional trauma and working with the parents. So I tucked that experience away, left the Marine Corps, pursued career in the private sector, but when Operation Desert Storm kicked off, I raised my hand from the IRR and asked if the Marine Corps could use me again, and I came back and served as a communications officer, platoon commander with 7th Engineers, and then an interim company commander. But our mission was to breach the minefields and liberate the country of Kuwait. Just before the ground offensive, I remember our CEO came up and said, hey, if you all want to call home, it's been a few months, you can head down to a tent that's set about 10 clicks south of the Kuwaiti border. We have a tent set up. So I remember going down there with my Marines, and we stood in line for 4 hours for a 15-minute phone call. And like many of us, I was a newlywed, hadn't talked to my wife in months. It was incredibly meaningful. And I remember coming back and asking the CEO who made that happen, and he said that the Red Cross played a role in that. And I was thinking, once again, the Red Cross is downrange with the military. And I do have to acknowledge we lost one Marine killed in action, Corporal John Waldron, 26 February 1991. And I remember right when combat action ceased, or combat operations ceased, we had a memorial service in the desert with a blowing wind to recognize and acknowledge him. Fast forward, I left the Marine Corps, went to the retired reserve, and when Operation Iraqi Freedom kicked off in the March on Baghdad, I raised my hand again and said, can you take an old Marine from the retired reserve to serve? And they did. I activated in 2004, deployed to Ramadi, Iraq in 2005. At this time, trained as a civil affairs officer, and I was tasked to serve as a director of the Civil Military Operations Center in Ramadi. And if you can imagine the scenario, this was like, I call it the little Gaza. It wasn't 2 million people, but it was about 400,000, a raging insurgency, a humanitarian crisis unfolding, kids drinking out of the Euphrates and dysentery, and no food, no drinkable water, no power. And we were doing our foot patrols in the raw sewage in the streets. But I remember taking my Marines down, and I said, we're going to live outside the wire 6 days a week and serve in the vicinity of the government center to get the Iraqis to come back to work. And on our first trip, we were attacked viciously by the insurgents, and I had to get wounded Marines out. And I remember we couldn't get a helicopter to come in because it was a built-up area, and so we took a Humvee tub, which was like a pickup truck with an extended bed, put the Marines in the back, triaged them. I jumped in the back with them to provide comfort and security, and we drove right back down IED Alley for about 5 clicks to the Army aid station, and choppered them out to the ER in Baghdad and on to Lunsdale Medical Center. And I tell you that because I learned that the Red Cross had people at Lunsdale, the Red Cross had people in Baghdad, and they got back to me saying, we're going to tell you how your Marines are doing. And then they started pushing us comfort kits with the hygiene kits and the snacks and the letters from home. And I can tell you that's very meaningful when you get 1 shower a week and hot meals 1 day a week. And so I was very grateful, especially the letters from home about people that didn't know us, but they said they were proud about what we were doing. But that was an example of the Red Cross trying to stay connected with us, making us feel like there was kind of a hope. And I do reflect on having a chance to see, we stood up elections, saw 7 Iraqi women vote for the first time, which was precious, but it came at a big price. And I'll forever think about and think on the names of the 2 Marines that were killed in our security team, and Lance Corporal Kelly Cannon and Marty Mortensen, 20 April 2005, who gave their life. And later that night, they passed from their grievous wounds, and I remember weeping. And then I also want to acknowledge my mentor that was there just a few clicks down the road, Ricardo Crocker, a mentor to a lot on his 4th tour, and he was killed in action on 26 May 2005. I hang on to those and memorialize them because they're important. But I think about how the Red Cross tried to keep connected with us. When we left Ramadi and went to Kuwait for a week to process out, there was a Red Cross office there at Camp Arifjan. Who knew? And so I remember walking in there, and it was just like a touch of home, and they had that sense of hope. And I remember that they didn't call it resiliency training then, but they taught us coping skills. And they said, we knew you had a rough time. We can teach you some skills to help you process what you experienced until you fly home. And so I always held that close to my heart and thought if I ever got a chance to give back, it'd be to the Red Cross. Little did I know in that building I'd be back a decade later when the Red Cross named it in honor of my late son Travis, and they called the Travis Jordan Healing Art Center. And it's to bring awareness to mental health. On 5 May 2016, my son, an active duty son, took his life. He was overcome by his mental health challenges. And I'll never forget when we had the knock on the door from the chaplain and the casualty officer. And it just, our life stopped. And I remember pulling my wife aside, my younger son Connor, and I said, you know, according to, and I heard my minister speak about this, but I said, there's 3 things that we can do, and we got to make a choice. Number 1, we can let this destroy us. Number 2, we could let it define us. Or number 3, we can strengthen us. And I thought it would honor Travis's life if we thought about him in terms of wanting to be strengthened and to kind of bring a sense of hope. And I can tell you, it doesn't always feel that way. And most days, I still cry in the morning. I've got a hole about this big in my chest. But I also found grace and healing, and I do my prayers, my devotion, and then I exercise and get to work. And but when I come here and see this going on and the hope it brings, I'm very moved. And I want to especially thank Bonnie Carroll. We've spoken about this, but when we first lost Travis, I couldn't string 3 words together about how it felt, and we met with her, and she connected me with a peer supervisor, another gentleman who had gone through the same thing I had, and now I'm a peer mentor for her organization because the peer mentor process, it really works. It makes a difference. But I'm grateful to you for that, my wife and I, and my younger son, Connor. And again, to all of you, because it tells me that there's hope. And I think if I was going to bring meaning to my son's life, he would be really proud to know that this is bringing hope and awareness to mental health. Thank you.
Hello everyone, Chef Robert Irvine here, founder of the Robert Irvine Foundation. Many of you might not know that I'm actually a veteran of Her Majesty's Royal Navy. That background is part of what helped me find my true passion, giving back to those that wear the cloth of our nation. When I think about the many years of support that I've given our veterans here in the United States, most of the meaningful ones have been providing life-changing smart technology. I bought wheelchairs. They completely break down the boundaries for our ill and injured heroes. I've seen how it's not only changed veterans' lives, but impacts the whole family. Also, when we host a program called Reuniting the Brave that brings service members and units back together after years of being apart, it's incredible witnessing their peer support network be rebuilt. In addition, their families and Gold Star families from the units attend, which makes it even more special. That program makes me remember the camaraderie that I had while I was in the service. Well, VA's Buddy Check program is here to help all veterans keep those bonds strong. Buddy Checks are about connection and support. It's a way to show that you care and remind a fellow veteran that they are not alone. Buddy Checks are about helping those from military service become connected to the community and to the VA resources. I've always believed in the power of food to change lives and bring people together. With that in mind, there's no really better buddy check. Try this. Plan a barbecue or a potluck dinner and invite veterans and supporters who understand the importance of connection. If you can't plan a dinner, remember that reaching out in a small way can make a difference, even if it's just a call or a text. The Department of Veterans Affairs is here for you too. Just like your buddies. They provide healthcare, benefits, and services that you need to live your best life. Visit VA Buddy Check at the va.gov to get involved. But more importantly, help make a difference by reaching out to a veteran, family members of veterans, caregivers, and survivors. Because together, we can make a huge difference.
That video was just so serendipitous how that came about. I was actually on a call with Face the Fight, briefing a snippet of Buddy Check and what we had on the agenda for this. And I was so thankful that someone reached out from the Robert Irvine Foundation, Bob over there, and we had a consult. And he said, Angela, what can we do for you? And I thought that was amazing. I said, hey, I would like some help, pushing out buddy checks because we want more pledges. And he said, we could talk to Robert and do a PSA. So that's how that came about. And let me say, when it came to the Face the Fight and buddy checks, so last year we were pushing about 5,000 pledges. But as of this morning, we have over 18,000 pledges. So... And that's because it's not just VA pushing it out. It's our partners. It's people seeing it. So if you're on LinkedIn, I hope you're on there. I push it out because I think it makes a difference. And we could talk about Buddy Check campaign this week, but what are we talking about? Buddy Checks all the time. So I got to get moving. I know we're a little behind, a little excited here. So our next panel is Workplace Wellness, and our moderator here is Eric Eversole, Chamber of Commerce, President of Hiring Our Heroes. Welcome, Eric.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Really honored to be here to talk about how do we implement buddy checks in the workplace and how important it is. And we really have a great group of panelists who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves here in a second. But I will tell you that as I prepared for today's remarks, it really made me think of a book, and I'm probably dating myself a little bit, but a book called All I Ever Needed to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten. And when I thought about buddy checks, it really made me think about that book because I remembered in kindergarten how important having a buddy was. It was that person who would hold your hand, it was the person who would take care of you. When you had a bad day in kindergarten, they were there to help take care of you and really look after you. They helped you get into some good trouble every once in a while. But buddies were something that all of us learned about when we were little, and we learned it in kindergarten. And for those of us who have served and been around the military, we also learned about the importance of buddies in service, our battle buddies, the people who had our six, that no matter how bad things got, they were there for us to take care of us. And so when we think about the importance of buddies, and we think about it in the context of both our military service and what we learned when we were little, having that buddy in the workplace as you transition is just as important as when you were in service, and in many cases, I think it's actually more important. So with that, I'm really looking forward to having a great discussion on buddies in the workplace and buddy check-ins. And with that, let me ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves briefly. Secretary Rodriguez.
All right, thank you, Eric. Thanks everyone for hosting this great event. It's always good to see a lot of familiar faces who are strong advocates in this space. I am the Assistant Secretary, for those who don't know me, the Assistant Secretary at the Department of Labor, Veteran Employment Training Service, and a retired Marine. Have to add that.
Hoorah.
Nice to be here with you all today. My name is Wendy DeCessory. I am the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships with American Corporate Partners, also known as ACP.
I'm Stan Kurtz, retired Navy veteran. I work for the Small Business Administration Office of Veterans Business Development. So we host programs for transitioning service members for Boots to Business, an entrepreneurship program. So just happy to be here.
Great, well thank you. Let's cut to the chase. So I mentioned at the beginning how important it was to have a buddy for veterans in the civilian workplace, for family members. Can you talk a little bit about, from each of yours perspective, why is it so important to have a buddy, and what does that really mean in the civilian workplace? Secretary Rodriguez? Sure.
Yeah, I've been fortunate the last 15 years since I've retired, as I've been in government, corporate government, and no telling where I'm going to land next when I leave eventually. But throughout my journey, I've had a good mentor, and I've had good partners. At the same time, I've been a good mentor. And I think that's what's the important piece of that, is oftentimes that we benefit from a mentor, but understanding that we also have to be a mentor when we've had that experience and we've had the luxury of having to learn from someone else. And oftentimes we forget about that small piece of the equation. And so when I speak to corporate employers, I'm like, you always have to have a program that, in many cases, when you build a program for veterans, that program benefits everyone. And oftentimes we're thinking about the only benefit to that veteran, but not the collective of an organization. We want to make sure that when we provide adaptability for someone who may be injured or ill, that's usually going to benefit almost everybody else in that organization. So we have to have a broader imagination on how we are supporting that veteran when they transition out. Everyone knows that is a challenge when you transition out of the military, as Eric just kind of alluded to a minute ago. But when you have someone who can help guide you along that next career pathway, that is inherently important. And you've all seen the data. I'll just repeat a few of the things that are important, right? How many veterans leave their first job in their first year? Up to 40%. About 80% leave their second job, right? And so in their second year. And so the reason that's important oftentimes is because the underemployment piece of that lack of knowledge when you're transitioning out of the military. And so having a mentor that helps you understand how to integrate yourself into the right roles at the right levels with the right experience will help you stay in an organization longer. And building a program that is inherently revolving around how do you make that individual successful, right? It's a return on investment for the employers. And getting them to understand how it's a value to the business. You don't want to hire veterans because we want to have sympathy for that veteran or just say we want to thank you for your service. We want to hire them because it's good for business. Every data point that we have at the Department of Labor shows hiring a veteran is good for business. And this is what I try to impart on CEOs and every corporate leader that I get to speak to, is that if you're looking to grow your business, which you all should, you're looking at your bottom line, hire veterans. We have the data to prove that. But at the same time, you have to be able to keep and retain those veterans once you do hire him or her. And so that's one of the things we focus on a ton over the last 4 years since I've been in office.
Great, thank you. Wendy, thoughts?
Well, there are several things that I'm going to draw upon that the Assistant Secretary just spoke about. And at ACP, what we're working on is mentorship specifically. And we're pairing individuals with the civilian workforce so that they can go through that process and learn what is out there. So, so some of the key things that he talked about are, I'm going to highlight in a slightly different terms. So a couple things are important that we've heard about today, that sense of purpose. That continuity from service in the military and understanding and continuing to find a way to serve and continuing to find that sense of community. So that buddy that you have and you want to find in that civilian landscape is going to help you understand where is that sense of service coming from and what is that sense of purpose going to be for you. And that mentor can help you learn what does that look like and what is the organization that's right for you and what does that career path ahead that's going to provide that sense of fulfillment. So in order to achieve what we find with those who have mentorship, especially through ACP, is that they are staying in their positions 85% of the time after 1 year. Because they have a mentor that's helping them understand what are those components that provide fulfillment, that provide that sense of purpose, and put you on that career path that combats underemployment. And you understand how you're going to fit into that landscape. But it really is that mentorship. It is that buddy that's checking in with you. And how we do it is we set up over the course of 1 year, hour-long conversations where you're checking in and having that conversation. So it is a buddy check. And so mentorship is it's one and the same. So absolutely everything that he's said and then some.
Stan?
So my experience before SBA, I did work Veterans Employment Services under a Department of Labor Jobs for Veterans state grant. So it's basically veterans helping veterans find employment. So as a brand new local veterans employment rep, I started working with veterans on the deck plate, helping them find employment. The harsh reality for most people that I met with was one, the salary, right? They're thinking they're going to make the big bucks, and then suddenly they figure out the harsh reality is, you know, you were built up, hey, you're going to make a lot of money when you get out, and then you start finding out what you're really going to make. The second harsh reality was the camaraderie was gone. It's gone. And you don't think about that, right? You just want to get out. But now, all your brothers and sisters, the camaraderie is gone, and isolation starts setting in. So that's why it's important. I know most of you here in the audience work with veterans in some fashion. So it's important for us to get those resources out there and for those employment representatives to know all the resources, start connecting them. So cut down on that isolation, get them into employment or entrepreneurship. Right? That sense of purpose, camaraderie. So I think that's important. So that's just my experience, is that harsh reality of losing that camaraderie, the isolation starts setting in, you start feeling like, you know, what's the mission, start feeling kind of worthless. That's when you have to pick them up, get them in employment or entrepreneurship if they want to go that route. So that's just my experience.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Stan, because I think you really highlighted something that most of us know who've been in the military and have transitioned out, is that transition can be really scary, even for the toughest of people. Can you help us understand, you know, help set the landscape a little bit about why transition can be so scary for so many service members and more importantly for their families? I mean, what are the things going on that make them particularly vulnerable? Stan, well, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think as you're transitioning out, again, in most cases you're thinking, okay, I'm done, I'm getting out. Especially if you have a family, then you start thinking about, can I get a job? Who do I need to talk to about that? I got to move my family, I got to get my kids in school, and all these things are swirling around in your head and where we're going to go and what we're going to do. And that's the time I think that you need those resources that a lot of us provide to help them through that process.
Yeah. Wendy?
I'll add a different layer of this. And when you do go into an employment landscape, there's a different culture that you're going into. So you're having to acclimate into a different way of being in your world of work. And so you're finding new levels of yourself. And so this goes back to having that mentor or having that buddy to be able to check in as you acclimate. And then once again, I'll talk a little bit about having that civilian mentor that can help you understand what's happening, and touching upon having those in the civilian world of work understand that veteran culture as they learn to acclimate as well. It's equally important that we have a civilian landscape that understands and values those veterans who are coming into that world of work, so we help on both sides of that.
Sir?
Yeah, I had a couple of things here. Is that oftentimes we finally have really changed the narrative around when someone transitions out of the military, they're not only their MOS when they're looking for their next job, right? Because oftentimes that's what everybody automatically thinks, is that someone comes out of the military, they have the specific skill sets that they've developed in the military, and that's the type of career that they're going to look to go into, right? I had 5 MOSs when I was in the Marine Corps, 21 years, right? That's just the way it is. You do a job, and that's what happens, right? Everybody's done that. Nobody does one job in the military, regardless of what branch of service you're in. And so when you take all of that, and you now all of a sudden you go into a corporate environment, and you may think you're going into the right type of career field, and you go into that career field and you realize it's completely different than what you anticipated. Just like when you're going to college, right? You go into a degree plan and you think that's the right degree plan, and it's not, and you change and you pivot to something else. It's the same thing that happens in corporate America often. And so having a mentor that kind of helps guide you along that path of like, this is where you want to use your skill sets. This is where your passions lie. Let's try to find you this right type of opportunity. But it takes a responsibility on the corporations as well. So we can't let them off the hook, because oftentimes they don't understand it either, right? They don't understand how to incorporate someone into their workplace. They might have technical skills and they bring them in to do certain jobs, but they're not really leveraging that individual's all-around skills. And so how do we take those all-around skills and put them in the right position at the right levels so they can thrive versus getting in there, earn a paycheck, and you go home every day and you don't have your buddies anymore that are around you to kind of help navigate all the stuff that happens after work. And so you need to have a buddy that helps you understand how you're going to get promoted up the corporate ladder. Many times veterans get into a job and they see themselves in that job, and I'm not going to see myself doing this for the next 20 years. I always talk about, you didn't see yourself as a young private or lieutenant for 20 years when you joined the military. You know there's a career progression. Same thing happens in the corporate space. But having someone to help you navigate that, understand what you need to do to prepare yourself for that next career evolution itself is so inherently important. And that's exactly what I've learned from my time as being in corporate American government.
Yeah, well, and to punctuate some of the pressure, there's a recent McKinsey study that said 60% of transitioning service members will make less in their first civilian job than they made while in the military. And that financial pressure, compounded by the fact that most military spouses are unable to work given the transient nature of military life, puts a lot of pressure on that service member as they search for that job. So it's not just the loss of the community and the tribe, it's also that added burden of financial pressure for a lot of these service members. And I think it's really powerful to set that stage. And we know that buddy checks work. I mean, we know that. We know the simple process of asking a question of how someone's doing or calling a buddy can really make a difference in someone's lives. And so I want you to, if you don't mind, if you have any personal examples where it was you personally or someone you've known who has served as a de facto buddy of sorts and helped make someone's life better or in some instances save their lives, would you mind sharing some of those stories? And Wendy, can I start with you?
May I use an example of a military spouse?
Do. Yes, please.
Because military spouses are serving as well. So I have had a colleague in the past who was a military spouse with a spouse deployed, and she was pregnant after having several miscarriages, finally pregnant, spouse deployed, renting a home, moving across country with a couple animals. And, you know, we as a team were just checking in on her and ensuring that the work was covered, that she was cared for, and that she knew that she had people around her. So I think that this goes to the heart of what a buddy check is. It does not have to be something big and overwhelming, but that you know that there are people who have your back if you need it. And so I would say that's one thing that I would highlight, is how simple it can be to be that buddy for someone else.
Yeah. Secretary Rodriguez?
Yeah, last week I was at a funeral for a Marine friend of mine. Some of you may know him and you may remember him, worked with him well. Seamus Ahern took his life the week before, and I was at his funeral last week in Chicago, or flew into Chicago and Iowa, right? And so someone you think on the surface, and I say his name because I think it's important for people to understand that his name is important. And for me, he's been a longtime friend of mine. We worked together under the Obama administration. He's a Marine, and married, wife and 3 children. Had a great career, great firm, political appointee. If I put all the Marines I know to this day in a room, I would have never thought it was him, right? But the struggle is real, and I think the reason I say the struggle is real, because oftentimes on the surface, people look at an individual and think that everything is going great, but the fear of losing someone's job sometimes is a bigger driver than actually losing their job. And so we're sitting in the church, and the father said, stop asking why and start figuring out how you could be present in someone else's life who's struggling, right? And I think that's the important piece behind it, is that we have to figure out how to continue to be present in someone's life, not knowing if they are indeed needing that help at that time, but they may need it later, and understanding how you continue to communicate with them, how you continue to check in with them consistently, and ensuring that they're well, right? Because there's a lot of things that actually occur behind the scenes that we don't see on the surface. And it's important for all of us to continue to look at what can we offer at that moment when someone needs it the most, right? Or at the minute, or at the time, how are we going to be available when someone needs it the most, especially in the business community? And I focus on employment, obviously, but when we're transitioning to employment and we understand how challenging it may be at that job, how challenging that transition may be, well, there's other people that have experienced the same challenges as well. And having a buddy who can talk through their challenges will oftentimes help you. And so, again, it's real for me because it's recent. And I think, again, understanding that when we're not doing our due diligence or making sure we're taking care of each other, those type of things occur.
Stan?
Yeah, I have a best friend of mine that I grew up with. So at the age of 13, all he ever wanted to be and all he said he was ever going to be was a pilot, right? So he structured his life. I went in the military, he went to college, and then went into the Navy to be a Navy pilot. And so all he ever wanted to be, structured his life, be a pilot. On a Sunday, beautiful Sunday morning in Pensacola, his life nearly ended. He was hit on a motorcycle, him and his wife. Life flighted him out. And so he spent a lot of time in the hospital and under drugs and depression and all the things that go with it. Anger, because he thought, all I ever wanted to be was a pilot. I will never fly again. Lost my leg. I actually took him up to Columbus, Ohio when they took his leg. So anyway, I walked in one day, and he was so happy to see me. To this day, he brings it up. That day, you walked in to save my life. Proud to say, after 11 years out of work, he went to Atlanta. He got into trainer. He got certified again, and he is a pilot for one of the major airlines as an amputee. He's actually in Dublin today. He flew last night. He's probably drinking a pint. And we last year in December, we went on vacation to Germany, just him and I hanging out, and our wives were there, but we drank beer and they went, Christmas shopping or whatever. But he constantly remembers and tells me about that day that just changed his life. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that story, Stan and Secretary Rodriguez and Wendy, because I think, you know, these conversations aren't theoretical. I mean, they're very real. And, you know, me personally, it's the one where you see something, you really have to say something and not be afraid. And that takes a lot of courage sometimes. We can talk about it, but there are going to be times when you see something that doesn't feel quite right about someone, and you're going to have to take a leap of faith that you're doing the right thing and say something. And so thanks for sharing those personal stories, because they really do put a lot of color around what we're talking about. Let's just, because we just have a couple more minutes here, two actually. How can people get involved? You know, I think, Wendy, you talked about it doesn't take a 20-hour commitment necessarily. Let's start with you. How can people get involved if they want to be a buddy and do the buddy check-in?
Well, it's quite simple to reach out. I would say the first thing is if you have a phone number, give someone a call. Don't hesitate to make that contact, first of all. And that would be that's first and simple. No one would ever not welcome a phone call. So do that. And then if you're interested in being involved in any of the organizations that service the community, reach out to these organizations, because the help is needed within the community. So know that we're all resources and could use that support as well.
Thank you. Secretary Rodriguez?
Yeah, I think the important piece is being able to tell our stories, right? I think telling our stories about our family members or people we are closely tied to, our buddies, our people we serve with, being able to openly tell those stories. I'm admittedly one of those that I've never really talked about my stories until I came to office. I realized I had the power of the microphone. And being able to use the microphone and the platform to really talk about stories that have affected me over the last 20 plus years of doing this, people I've served with, and how it's affected them. So being able to tell those stories, I think, encourages someone else to also tell those stories and also get involved, to Wendy's point, with organizations like TAP and how phenomenal TAPS is and how they change people's lives after a tragedy. And I think things like that are so inherently important. We have to be able to let people know that it's okay to not be okay, right? And this goes back to what I was talking about with the employers earlier. I meant to say this, is that when we talk about building a mental health stronger veteran in an employment arena, then that usually, when we build programs like that, that benefits everybody, because we're building programs for those veterans, so we know it's going to benefit all the employees in whatever company that you actually work for. So I think it's inherently important for everybody to take ownership of this and ensuring that we continue to do the check-ins just like this is asking us to do year-round, to Angela's point, not just through Veteran Check-In Week.
Yeah. Stan?
Yeah, I think, we have an amazing staff. Our Veterans Business Outreach Centers across the country, we have 31 of those. Most of them are veterans. Most of them had owned businesses or still own businesses. And they build those relationships, and we talk about mentorship. They build those relationships with people who start business or grow their business, and they stay in contact with them. And here at headquarters, here in D.C., I still stay in contact with a lot of businesses. And what I found is even after pandemic, it was important to check in with them. And a lot of businesses, small businesses, were struggling, really struggling. So to the point where, hey, Stan, can you connect me with anybody in employment, because I got to get a job to save my business. And so I think our staff and even at headquarters or out in the field try to stay in touch with those business owners. And it may be, if they're financial hardships, who do they need to talk to, and we know who those resources are. So staying in contact is important, I think.
Thank you, Stan. And I'll last plug, please, please, please visit the VA's website for the Veteran Buddy Check. Please take the pledge, and more importantly than taking the pledge, because that's important, make sure your friends know about the pledge and encourage them to take it as well. This is a community effort, and we're really thankful that our esteemed panelists could join us today, and could we give them a round of applause?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Every day, our veterans face unseen battles. But no one should fight alone.
Anywhere you want to go.
Face the Fight brings people and organizations together to reduce veteran suicide. Every life is worth living, and every veteran matters. Together, we can face the fight against veteran suicide.
Okay, our last speaker of the event. Our next speaker is going to kick off the Veterans Social Connection. Dr. Jay Gorman, and not to be cute, Dr. J is what we call him. So the first time I saw Jay Gorman on a call, I thought he was Christopher Reeve. He looked like Superman. I totally am calling you out right now. Everybody's going to see it. No pressure. He told me when I met him, he said, that's the best camera angle ever, Angela, and he hasn't moved it since. So Dr. Jay Gorman, our Education Director, Vision 1, Mental Illness Research, Education, and Clinical Center, Department of Veterans Affairs. Jay, Dr. Jay.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, Angela. Appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. In the talk about workplace wellness, the idea of camaraderie really spoke to me, especially in the context of today, the Buddy Check Summit. It reminds me of a simple yet powerful truth that sometimes the most impactful support we can receive are from those who's walked in the same shoes. And that's why I'm excited to talk about veteran socials. These are, I have the privilege really of connecting veteran leaders across the country, 24 states in over 120 locations. These are veteran leaders who are building spaces for individuals to create connection, to build friendships. They're bowling together, they're barbecuing together, they're gaming together, they're having coffee together, they're learning about resources together. These are veteran hosts who run social gatherings weekly or monthly in communities where they live. And in the spirit of Buddy Check Week, for the whole month of October, we have been able to transform veteran socials into Buddy Check socials, where attendees and hosts will be putting particular emphasis on reaching out, checking in, and being there for one another. And in the honor of Buddy Check Week, embracing that spirit, I think it's important for us all to take that extra step to connect, to reach out. Social connection itself, it reduces loneliness. It decreases isolation. It's essential. It's like food or water. Without enough, we feel depleted. And we have the opportunity here to replenish those resources, not just for ourselves, but for the communities that we care about. And Buddy Check itself, much like veteran socials, is a peer-led model. And what a peer-led model does is it can take a message that's important and recognize that it can make it even more powerful because the right messenger is sending that message. We're able to build trust, right, with peer-led models. Right? Trust not just between individuals, but trust across communities and across organizations. So when I look around the room now, I see we have all the ingredients for social connection. And there are 3 components that make up social connection. That is quality, structure, and function. And quality, I look around the room and I say, hey, that's you all, right? High potential. We have the quality, we can connect. Structure, we've got a venue, we've got a place to gather, we've got a place to build a community. And function, we have shared goals, we have an overlapping mission. So today, as we embrace the veteran socials we're about to have, I ask that you all sit down, grab a coffee, chat with someone, exchange information, because these small acts of connection have the power to change lives. And if you're interested in starting your own veteran social, learning more, or just saying hi, I'll be out there. I'm always open to connect. I want to thank you all for being here and for your continued commitment to supporting the veteran community. Thank you.
Great, Jay. It's hard to follow Superman. That's all. Really, I'm Wonder Woman. You just don't know it under here. You can ask my husband. He'll tell you. So I just want to say thank you so much for everyone here coming today, everyone online watching from the VA medical centers and from home. Now, if you're in the medical center and you're sitting there next to somebody that you don't know, hey, this is a great time to reach out and be a buddy. So you can look at the person next to you and let's share 3 things: your name, where you're from, and your favorite color. So for those of you who are online by yourself, I'll be your buddy right now. My name is Angela Spatz. I'm from the most south side of Chicago and still have a 606 zip code, right, Prince? There you go. And I'm sure everybody could probably guess what my favorite color is. Red, there you go. So again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for Red Cross. Thank you for Face the Fight. Thank you for our refreshments today. And most of all, thank you for the fellowship. Have a wonderful day. And thanks for taking care of veterans business.